Hello, everyone. So today we are looking at what literary analysis is and how to do literary analysis in 8 steps. So this is the abridged version. If you'd like the full version, it's linked in the description, and this PowerPoint is also linked in the description. So please like and subscribe to this channel. It'll really help me out, and let's get going. Now, what we want to look at first is what exactly is literary analysis? How can we wrap our brains around that? So analysis is the practice of looking closely at a construct to see how the small components that compose it affect its meaning as a whole and how those small parts also carry meaning individually. So whether we're looking at a piece of machinery or a creative nonfiction essay or a political speech or a novel, all of those structures have small pieces which will contain units of meaning that have meaning on their own and meaning as part of their whole. So now on the other side, like I said, today we are looking at specifically at what literary analysis is. So literary analysis is focusing on how literary rhetorical tools like tone and imagery and character and many others work together as individual components to create an overall meaning. And so that's the kind of evidence you're going to be looking for when you're doing rhetorical analysis yourself. Now, what is literary analysis actually asking you to do? So it's asking you to evaluate the choices authors made, and it's also asking you to find evidence to support the questions you're going to ask about a work and the assertions you'll eventually make about a work. And so why is doing any of this literary analysis important? It's important because just practically speaking, you're going to be asked to do it a lot. You're going to be asked to do it in high school and college and potentially before and potentially after. Additionally, it's important to consider because it gives you the tools, once you know how to do it, to write effective literary analysis essays, as well as be able to craft YouTube scripts for literary analysis. You might have noticed some of your favorite YouTubers have video essays that incorporate literary analysis. And it just will give you a greater appreciation, a deeper understanding of whatever work you're interacting with. And so these instructions are designed to help you focus your literary analysis, not get overwhelmed, keep you motivated, and just give you some tools to approach it strategically and purposefully. And by the end of this video, you should be able to get to starting that literary analysis essay or that video script. And you don't need very many required materials. You just need your brain, of course, a word processor, a piece of paper, the primary text you're working with, and any research tools or any other relevant research materials available. And so this first step is all about asking questions. You're going to want to ask different kinds of questions to get your brain thinking in this first stage. And so there's different kinds of questions you can ask yourself, like what stayed with you after reading or watching something? Did anything confuse you? Did you notice any kinds of patterns? Are there any ironies or contradictions at work? And so by asking yourself these kinds of questions, you're going to start to make connections between the material and the kinds of questions you're asking. And all these different kinds of questioning will allow you to start to pull at different threads to arrive at different ideas. And the second step is all about gathering evidence. So when you're gathering evidence, you are gathering textual evidence because that's where most of the evidence you're gathering is going to come from while you are writing a literary analysis essay. It's going to come from the text itself. So now that you've asked a question, you're trying to find evidence to answer that question. And when you try to find evidence to answer that question, you're going to see connections between that evidence. So that's what this step 2 is all about. Step 3 is all about crafting your thesis. So the thesis is like a roadmap to your essay, essentially, along with your introductions, which I'll discuss in a moment. It tells your reader exactly what the purpose of this essay is and where this essay is going to go. So it should be something that's more than a simple yes or no questions, and it's often typically the last line in your introduction. Now, this step 4 is about developing and structuring arguments. So what's important to consider here are there are many different kinds of arguments that you can incorporate into your essays, and your teacher and the prompt might ask you to do a specific kind of argument or multiple kinds of arguments. So just some to consider are comparing and contrasting, tracing, like tracing an image or a phrase or a piece of dialogue throughout a book and making connections between those reoccurrences. debating something, like debating a moral or ethical or aesthetic issue raised by the text. And then the next step is step 5, the title. So the title is very important, and it should clearly indicate the focus of your analysis. And so that's the most important takeaway from this step, is your title should tell your reader exactly what they're getting into. And step 6, the introduction, is typically the first paragraph of your essay, and it's usually a paragraph in length. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but essentially it's giving valuable and necessary context to your overall essay, and it also incorporates your thesis and is telling your readers exactly where this essay is going to go. It's essentially the roadmap of the essay alongside your thesis, because it's telling your reader, this is the map we're following to go on this trip. The body paragraphs end up being the trip itself. The conclusion ends up our reflection on the trip. Now, the body paragraphs themselves are wrought from the evidence you've gathered, the question you're trying to answer, the thesis you've constructed, and the introduction you've constructed. So now that your reader knows where you're going to go, you need to fulfill that promise of where you're taking them. And so the most important takeaway to consider for your body paragraphs is that each body paragraph should focus on one specific idea that you develop in order to support your thesis. And they should have strong topic sentences, and you can consider topic sentences kind of like mini theses, because they tell your reader exactly what this paragraph is about and exactly how it supports your thesis. Now, step 8 is the conclusion. So the conclusion is doing more than simply restating the thesis. It's actually synthesizing and not just summarizing your arguments. So it's framing them in a new tone, whereas the introduction has a tone of, this is where we're going, be excited about it. The conclusion has a sense of, now we're here, now you've learned this, now you know this that you didn't know before, now you have this larger picture. What are we going to do with this information? Why is this important still? And why is this relevant information, and why is your stance on it something important to take with them? And those are essentially the 8 steps. And like I said, I go much further into depth into the extended version of this video. And here's a literary analysis essay checklist that your essay should potentially incorporate and your process should incorporate. So it should have an arguable thesis, careful attention to the language of the text, attention to patterns or themes, and a clear interpretation telling your reader, this is one way the text can be understood, supported by the evidence you support from the text and sometimes other relevant resources to support your particular interpretation. And if you're ever having trouble, make sure to reach out. You're definitely not alone. Reach out to relevant resources like your instructor, your campus writing center, your librarian. They're all happy to help you. That's what they're there for. And research further to generate more ideas on your own as well. Do some peer reviews with your peers in or outside of class, or have a friend or family members help you revise your literary analysis essay. So that's essentially how to get started on literary analysis in a nutshell. Please review the PowerPoint for further context. Also look at the other video for further context where I break all of these concepts down. And please like and subscribe to this channel. I really appreciate you watching, and see you next time. Thanks.